Chapter 13 of Winning His Way by a Self-Made Man. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 13, in which Squire Roach finds out that Mr. Jebb is the boss of the situation. 2 months had elapsed since Frank Morris had taken charge of the Argus, and the change for the better was so marked as to have little doubt in the mind of Squire Roach that his well-planned scheme to get possession of the paper was a dismal failure. Not only that, but he recognized the fact that he had placed himself in an unenviable position through his secret dealing with Mr. Jebb, who thereby had acquired a hold upon him, which he had made use of by demanding a weekly salary and expenses both for himself and Mr. Robinson, pending a more definite settlement. But as week after week slipped by and the Argus appeared to be slowly but surely recovering its lost ground, and the chance of a sheriff sale on the property more and more remote, the squire began to grow worried. He had several interviews with Mr. Jebb, but they amounted to nothing. That astute gentleman, having convinced himself that he held Squire Roach's reputation in the palm of his hand, was satisfied to live on the fat of the land without the necessity of hustling for a living, and his associate Mr. Robinson was of the same mind. At last Squire Roach threw up his hands and advised his confederates to leave for Chicago, as he did not see his way clear any longer to employ them as he had contemplated. "Why not revert to your original idea of starting a new paper?" said Mr. Jebb with the tranquillity of a man who knew he would not have to foot the bills. "The risk would be altogether too great with the Argus in the field," replied the squire, shaking his head. "But you are in honor bound to provide for both myself and Mr. Robinson, whom I induced to come here from Chicago to further your interests. I think I have done very handsomely by you both for the last 2 months. You and Mr. Robinson have boarded at my expense at Neptune House during that time, and in addition I have paid you a weekly stipend. And now that things have failed to come your way, you propose to cut us off without the proverbial shilling. Is that it? I expect to pay your way to Chicago, as well as furnish transportation for your friend. To this I will add $100 for yourself and $50 for Mr. Robinson." "You don't take me for a fool, do you, Squire?" Mr. Jebb said as he lit a cigar and settled back in his chair. "What do you mean, Mr. Jebb?" asked Squire Roach haughtily. "I mean this. You hired me to do a job of dirty work which I carried out to the letter. My reward was to be a steady and lucrative position. It is no fault of mine that your plans have gone astray. Since it is out of your power, you say now, to furnish me with a position, why, I think it is up to you to hand me a reasonable equivalent in cash, say $5,000. "What?" roared the banker, growing as red as a beet at what he considered the insolence of the proposal. $5,000, I said, and $1,500 additional for Mr. Robinson. "What do you take me for, sir?" roared the squire hotly. "A sensible man, I hope," said Mr. Jebb coolly. "If Mr. Robinson and I were to sign an affidavit setting forth the true facts of our business relations with you, Squire Roach, and we were to transmit the same to Mrs. Morris, I think your usefulness as a member of this community would suffer a serious eclipse." "Do you mean to tell me to my face that you would dare to do such a thing?" vociferated Squire Roach, with a violent thump on the floor with his cane. "Such a contingency is not impossible, in the event of you refusing to hand over the 2 sums mentioned," replied Mr. Jebb, calmly blowing out a cloud of tobacco smoke. "Do you intend to blackmail me, you scoundrel?" roared the rich man. "Not at all. I was merely suggesting the only way you can make a settlement with us that will sidetrack unpleasant results." "You are a rascal, sir," howled the irate banker. "It is possible there are a pair of us. The scheme was yours, not mine. The inducement was all on your side. If I am a rascal, so are you." "How dare you talk to me in that strain?" sputtered the squire, who saw that he could not palliate the part he had taken in the conspiracy, "because I don't recognize any difference between us, so far as this affair is concerned. I regret having had any business dealings with a man of your stamp," said the big banker. "I have no doubt you do. But since you saw fit to inveigle me—" "Inveigle you, sir?" "Precisely. Since you have done so, you will have to face the music. You will save a lot of unnecessary bother by signing a check for $6,500 now and close up the transaction." Squire Roach's reply as he jumped to his feet would scarcely bear printing. He shook his fist in the face of the imperturbable Mr. Jebb and flounced out of the hotel room where the interview had taken place. Mr. Jebb grinned placidly, threw the butt of his cigar out of the window, and went downstairs to find Robinson and engage in a game of billiards. Squire Roach went home in no very amiable mood. He let himself in with his private latch-key and proceeded at once to his library. "The infernal rascal!" he muttered as he threw himself into an easy-chair. "He has me on the hip. I must either accede to his demand or face a public exposure. Is there not some way I can circumvent that rascal?" It was not a pleasant evening. It was intensely dark and gusty. The gloomy sky threatened a fall of rain at any moment. It was a propitious night for dark enterprises, and perhaps it influenced the squire's subsequent actions. One by one the lights were extinguished in the mansion as the inmates severally retired to sleep, but still the dim glow of the brass lamp in the banker's study burned on. He had not moved apparently for an hour, but now, when the handsome ormulu clock on the mantel struck midnight, he stirred and finally got up. For another hour he paced slowly and moodily up and down the velvet carpet, pausing occasionally by the window to look out into the dismal night. A few drops of rain pattered at intervals on the window panes, and every once in a while a big lilac bush, which stood near the corner of the library, would flop against the glass, and the sound would make the squire start nervously. 1 o'clock chimed from the clock. Squire Roach, as if actuated by a sudden resolve, walked over to a closet, from which he took an old coat and soft brown hat. Donning these, he softly let himself out of the house and took his way in the direction of the Neptune House. He did not go along the regular thoroughfare, but by byways and back streets, where he met nobody abroad at that hour of the night. End of chapter 13.